Welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast, the photo imaging industry's leading news source. Here's your host, Gary Pageau. The Dead Pixel Society podcast is brought to you by Media Clip, Advertech Printing, and Independent Photo Imagers.
Hello again, and welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. I'm your host, Gary Pageau, and today we're joined by Peter Mohr, who's coming to us from Canada, and he's a business coach and retailer. And if you remember, he's also a past guest. He was on back in December of 2022 talking about all kinds of things about how to run your business successfully. But this time we're talking about how to get out of your business. Hi, Pete. How you doing today?
So great to be back with you, Gary. Thanks so much for having me. And you know what? It's so crazy how quickly time flies.
Oh,
and,
absolutely.
Boy, I tell you, a year and a half goes and it's like, ping, I thought it was yesterday.
There you go. Now, for those who may not have been listeners back then, I highly encourage you to go back to that episode. But can you give us a little quick introduction of what you do? And
Sure.
Also mention like your retail stores, which I think are relevant.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, as you said, I'm a retailer. So we have shoe stores here in Canada. We've got 2 shoe stores called Shoetopia. And I guess you could call that as one of my day jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I spend about a day and a half a week with the shoe stores. And then I spend the other time coaching business owners, and that business is called Simplifying Entrepreneurship. And that's my coaching business. And I do a lot of coaching for retailers. I do coaching for lawyers and all sorts of different coaching for different business owners, because business owners are a unique clan. And they go through all sorts of different issues, and their lives are tied together. And there's just so much around entrepreneurship. But the reality of it is whether you have a photo shop, a shoe store, a landscaping company. I work with a fellow that makes musical instruments in India. Mm-hmm. So it really doesn't matter. A lot of times, the issues that the business owner have are the same no matter what sort of industry you're in. And that's what I coach. I coach the business owners themselves as a general rule, and sometimes work with their teams so long as they're involved as well. Mm-hmm. Trying to say, I like to say, helping them move from operators of their business to owners of their business. Mm-hmm. And, I'm trying to release freedom for them.
Sure.
Because, Gary, as we start our businesses, and unless you're really heavily, deep pocketed, let's call it, as we start our businesses, we have to make all the decisions. We have to be in the weeds. We have to be doing what we got to do and getting it going and all this kind of stuff. But the reality of it is that once you get to a certain point, we get habitualized to making all the decisions, and we don't know how to release them because we've been doing it for so long.
Right.
And, some of the stuff, a lot of the work that I did and what we talked about in that first sort of episode was all around the 5 Ps. And quickly capping that, the 5 Ps are understanding your promise, aligning your product or service offering, your process, your people, and so that you can make the right amount of profit. And once you get to the right amount of profit, you can get more freedom. Mm-hmm. So if you like that sort of idea and concept, go back and listen to the one from a couple of Decembers ago now, but it's still every bit as relevant as it was back then.
Exactly. Well, and that's really why I thought it was interesting to have you back on, because, there's certain parts of the photo business that are very, very specific to the photo business, right? There's equipment, there's software, there's marketing, there's a lot of things that are just evergreen, true for every business. And that was a lot of the stuff you talked about. So one of the challenges that a lot of people in the photo industry are struggling with today in a lot of different levels is, what do I do with my business? How am I going to get out of this thing? In a way that makes sense for me, right? I have friends who have run camera stores for a lot of years, and then they reach a certain age and they realize they have no plan, and they just have to have a blowout sale and close the door. And again, that may be great if that's your plan, but if it's not planned that way, it's maybe going to be a disappointment. And so when should someone start thinking about their exit? Let's say they've got all their P's lined up.
Yeah.
And they're making the right amount of profit. And so when should they start thinking about it? Certainly not, if I want to retire next year, not this year, right? There's got to be a timeline.
It should be when you open your business.
Okay.
You start thinking about the end right then. And I'm not saying you focused all your energies on it, but ultimately you got to start thinking about that stuff because, Gary, there's one thing that's going to happen that's a guarantee. You will exit your business someday.
Right.
And here's why people exit businesses. Number one, they die.
Right.
Number two, they become disabled in some way.
Sure.
Number three, divorce. With over 50% of marriages, especially if there's a partnership there, divorce causes a lot of business exit. Distress, if the business is in, poor shape, and disagreement amongst partners. So the 5 Ds, death, disability, divorce, distress, and disagreement, will cause you to exit your business someday. So if you know with certainty that you will exit your business someday, why wouldn't you start planning now?
Right. Well, because I think some people, it's almost like, not having life insurance for yourself, right? I don't want to think about that, right? Because if I think about that, it's uncomfortable.
Well, I think the reality of it is if you have any future plan past the day of exiting your business, you need to start thinking about this because there's not only the future plans of what you will do, because a lot of small business owners, especially if they've been at it for a long time, and maybe it's a family business, couple of generations, Gary, I work with a lot of next generation people and business transition and a lot of that sort of stuff. And, do you really want to leave your business or not set it up for a proper transfer to your kids? And if you're not transferring it to your kids, do you really want to leave it where there's money on the table for the new owner and you're not going to get that so that you can live the life that you want to live after your business? Sure. One of the interesting stats around the business transfer is that 70%, 70% of people that sell or exit their business regret that decision 1 year later.
Right. And why is that? Is that because they feel that they didn't get enough, or they wanted to keep working, or they didn't feel
because they didn't have a plan for after exit?
Okay, they didn't have just a plan at all.
They didn't have a plan.
Right.
We plan for business, we plan for budget, we plan for marketing, we plan for all this stuff. But everybody just says, "Oh, I'm going to turn 55 or 60 or 65 or whatever your magic age is for you," and you say that's when I'm going to retire. But what does retirement mean?
Right.
And what's after retirement for you? And so many business owners that have been so involved in their business for so long don't have a plan for after retirement. And that plan's not only the personal plan, it's also a financial plan.
Right.
And so, although I'm not a financial planner and all that sort of stuff, but I'm a strong believer in getting all your ducks in a row before you exit. And that includes insurance, and that includes wills, and that includes all of the other things that go along with it, because it's all part of the exit planning process for you, the business owner, to make sure that you take as much with you through the process as you possibly can, including tax planning and all that other stuff, right?
So consult a professional for those things.
For sure.
You don't find it here.
Yeah. But, and that's part of your exit planning team. And I think that's what I'm getting back to.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
You need to have a proper CPA, a proper lawyer or an attorney, a proper financial planner to help you through. I'm in the midst of getting my certified exit planning. So, a proper CPA that's going to help take you through some of these things and help you organize your exit properly. And all of these different things so that you can enjoy your retirement and exit with the maximum amount of money. You had mentioned, liquidation. And as a former business broker, I used to be a licensed business broker back about 15 years ago, helping people buy and sell businesses. And as a former business broker, you always knew the businesses that were running properly and the ones that weren't, because the ones that were running properly before the exit went for multiples, and the ones that weren't went for a discount.
Right.
And so what the whole 5P process that we talked about a year and a half ago is really setting your business up so that it's running on rails without you. And when the business is running on rails without you and earning that type of profit, you're going to start looking at getting a maximum exit for your business.
Yeah,
it's part of the exit process.
Because I think one of the expectations that I encounter sometimes when I talk to people who are looking to exit, they kind of look at someone buying their business as a reward. Like, I'm going to make, I don't know, $1 million. Somebody's going to buy my camera store for $1 million because I put all this into it and I deserve it. And I'm like, they're buying the future. They're not buying what you did. And it's a very typical, unfortunate perception.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Photo retailers, energize your sales with ShareMe Chat, the proven texting platform. Using chat to text on your website keeps your customers connected and buying. See us at Pro and IPI to find out why dealers using ShareMe Chat close more sales without adding staff. Find out more at shareme.chat.
You know, it's really, really interesting. One of the first steps in preparing your business plan is to get evaluation done on your business currently, like today. Mm-hmm. And so you use a professional to get a business evaluation because your thoughts of what your business is worth and the business evaluation are usually quite different. Mm-hmm. And you have to get over this gap that's there.
Right.
That's part of the gap. If you don't like that gap, then you have work to do.
Right.
And that work usually revolves around the 4 C's of capital, essentially. Mm-hmm. And those 4 C's really are human capital, right, which means, you know, your team.
Yeah. Do you have
How good is your team?
Yeah, exactly. Can it run without you if the team is?
No.
Yeah, exactly.
No. Right. So you got human capital, you got customer capital. Mm-hmm. How good's your client list? Mm-hmm. You got structural capital, which we talked about a lot in the last episode, which is all around process. Mm-hmm. Are your processes documented? Mm-hmm. You know, are they searchable? Are they understandable? Are they reliable? Are they efficient?
Right.
Are they sure? You know, and so you have human, customer, structural, and the last one is social capital. Mm-hmm. And when you look at social capital, how much, you know, depending on if you're a small town or in a big city, whatever the case is, but, you know, what's your social capital? Do your clients like you? Does your community rally around your store? Are you the key person there? Mm-hmm. What are you giving back to your community? Mm-hmm. All of the things around community involvement are your social capital. And people don't often put much take a whole lot of look at that until it's time to sell their business. And the person's going, well, like, how does anybody even know you? You're not involved in anything.
Mm-hmm. And how much does that factor into the valuation, right? I mean, I know these folks can probably put a number on it, but
yeah, they do put numbers on it.
But it's like, what's the weight on those 4 C's, right? I mean,
yeah, well, I mean,
% each, or which one's the?
Yeah, I mean, I do think social capital is a little bit less than the other 3,
sure,
but I think it's valuable. And so human capital is obviously monstrous, right? Who your team is. Customer capital is very big because the customer, they're buying a customer list, right? Sure. Yeah. Are you taking emails? So many retailers that I know don't take people's emails. I mean, like, if I'm buying your business, I'm going to ask you how many customers. You're going to say, oh, well, we put through 30,000 tickets last year. How many emails do you have? 50.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, email is the number one thing still today, is the number one thing to directly contact your client. Mm-hmm. It's vitally important.
Sure.
Structural capital. So if I don't know anything about running a photography business, but I like everything else about your business, and I can tell you, I didn't know anything about running. I'd run many businesses in the past, but I've never owned a shoe store before I bought my shoe store.
Right.
And so I came in as a green shoe store owner, and the business had been going for 12 years. It had some process. It was pretty poor, to be honest with you, but I structured it in the deal that the owner stayed around. And while he stayed around for a couple of months, I hammered out process with him because I needed it. Right. But if that was given to me up front, I would have paid more for that up front, not to have to worry about, because I know that the process is running. I can come in, sit at my desk, see how things go for the first few months, and then start making my changes.
And actually, the social capital side is actually the one, it's going to take some time, but you can actually build that fairly quickly.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, we do, like, as a small town retailer, both of our stores are in small town. We're involved all over the place. We're helping out hockey kids teams. We're, heavily involved in the local food bank. Mm-hmm. We do all sorts of different things that are supporting our community all the time. And it's just part of being a good partner in your community. And so, if somebody is coming in saying, how deep are you within your community? We go deep in our communities. And, I think our social capital is fairly strong. Structural capital is really strong because we talked about this in the last one too, the 4A's of accountability. When you start releasing some accountability, the 4A's are assess it, address it, align it, and assign it. So when you think of a process, you assess that process that you're looking to hand off to somebody, assess it, address it. So if it needs to change, you address it. Align it. Who do I see on my accountability chart that this may go to, and then assign it, which means I'm actually handing over authority. I'm not just giving them the title. I'm saying you can now own this, and they're saying yes, I would like to own this. And that's sort of this idea behind structural capital and human capital. So if you get your business running on rails without you, it's worth way more in most cases than if you were the key foundation, because the buyer is looking at it saying, hey, if I buy this guy out and he's making all the decisions,
right,
that's not great.
Yeah. I mean, you're basically got, 4 walls and some furniture, basically.
Yeah, and some cameras and whatever the case is, right? Yeah. It's like, I'm now a little bit worried about this deal. Where if I went in and it's like, hey man, I work a day and a half in my store. My managers tell me what to do when I go to the store. I don't tell them what to do.
Right. I'm going to buy your shoe stores then. It's basically what you're pitching me your shoe stores.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting piece too, Gary. When we look at the exit side of things, right. People want to exit a business a lot of times because they're just tired of working it.
Right.
But if you get your business humming on rails like this, then why not keep it as a good investment?
Yeah. I mean, there's no incentive for you to sell. Hopefully your 4Ds aren't coming back to bite you, or your 5Ds.
Well, and I mean, if they are, it's ready.
Yeah, and then if they do, you're ready. Right, exactly.
But on the other side of things, it's like, as I assess my business every quarter, I'm kind of like, okay, well, how am I doing? And what, is this still a worthy investment? Like any other investment that you have in your portfolio, it's like, hey, I've spent this amount of money on this business and it has to turn a certain amount of profit for me. And if it isn't, then I'm going to look at it and I either have to clean it up and sell it, or, whatever the case is. Or in my case, it's like, hey, for the amount of work that I put into my store, it spits off good it spits off good revenues, and it's running fairly well without me most of the time. Like I said, they tell me what to do. They said to me last week, can you go in on Sunday morning before the store opens and do 40 or 50 videos for all the new product launches as we're recording this in early spring? It's like, we've got a lot of new stuff in. So one of my jobs in our store is to be front stage. So I set up my camera and my mics and my lights, and I start doing all those social videos that are going to be posted over the next couple of months of new entries. And that's one of my jobs as one of the people on the team. And they tell me when they need it. I don't tell them when I'm doing it.
Right. And you better be there Sunday morning.
And I was. And then I hand them a Google Drive. Here's your videos. And then they edit them and crop them and post them and do all the things that they need to do. But as a good team player, I'm doing what I'm told. And, that's one of the positions that I have within the store. So, all of these things are how we craft a successful exit and how we craft our business to run on rails. But it all works like the 5 Ps, all of these things, the 4 Cs we talked about that are going to enhance the value of your business, those human capital, customer capital, structural capital, social capital. If you're working on one of those things every quarter, your business is going to be more valuable when you are ready to exit. Because remember, one day you will exit.
Let's talk about types of exits, because I've always kind of been telling people there's basically 3. There's sell your business, pass on your business, whether it's to employees or family members, or just close it down. And those are all equally valid if that's your plan. Right. Now, the challenge is, you may be forced into doing one of those and it's not your plan.
It's true. Like, those 5Ds can hit when you don't expect.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, I mean, if you have the things that we have talked about, and you're working on those through the next 1, 2, 5 years, whatever the case is, you're going to be so much more prepared and feel so much more at ease when it does happen. But at the same time, how can you exit? Well, I mean, as a former business broker, you can call a business broker and you can list your business for sale, right? or you can do an employee stock buyout, right? That's an option that a lot of people don't look at.
Well, I mean, and to walk us through that piece of it, because like you said, a lot of people don't look at it. What are some of the pros and cons? I mean, obviously, if your human capital is really good, if you built that piece up, that's who you're going to be selling to. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, it depends on how deep their pockets are and what kind of arrangement you need as well.
Yeah.
So it all sort of flows into that equation. It's kind of like there's taxable, depending on where you're living, what state and all that kind of stuff, or province here in Canada. As we look at, you really have to look into the taxable ways of doing that. And, you can allocate shares out over a course of a series of years, retain certain amount of ownership so you can receive dividends over a certain amount of years. So it depends on your timeline. It depends on your team, depends on a lot of different things. So it can be a complicated model, but it can be pretty simple too, depending on what the situation is. And if
how
you
is that
don't,
different? I mean, I guess that eventually becomes like an ESOP, right? An employee stock
yep,
ownership.
exactly.
And
what it is.
What's interesting is that I've noticed, like over in England, for some reason, there's been a couple very large camera store chains that have gone ESOP.
Yeah.
So it is something, but why don't more people do it, do you think?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
When you think about propaganda, you probably think about Kim Jong-un and his funny little haircut. And you'd be exactly right. The podcast, This Is Propaganda, doesn't want you to believe that. They want you to question the ads you see, the news you read, the brands you love. What they don't want you to question is that they are advertisers themselves, peddling the same tricks they claim you fall for to make a living. If you need something to boycott, look no further than this show. Don't listen to This Is Propaganda.
I think because they find it's too hard. Like it's too hard to navigate through, which is why I talked about having the proper team for your exit strategy, having the right attorney, having the right CPA, your certified professional accountant, having the right, team together to knock off this sort of stuff. And then there's always the other parts too. Not every business owner is forthwith and sort of, open with their team all the time. And I think I share everything with my management team. They see it down to the penny. And so including what I take from my business and all, they see it all because I'm asking them to make the decisions. So if I'm truly asking them to run the business, they need to have full clarity on what the business looks like. And so from that kind of thing, a lot of times the business owner doesn't necessarily want to divulge everything. Well, how can anybody buy into something they don't have full information on?
Sure. Yeah, that's tough. That is tough. And I think that's, that's kind of an older school perception, right? But you're right. I mean, it's almost like doing due diligence when you're buying a company, right? You got to do due diligence and the employees have to have due diligence on the whole thing as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's that avenue. If you have kids in the business, there's the next generation type work. And a lot of that work. And you and I, before we hopped on, we were talking about how many next generation failures there are. And it's a really interesting thing. But from a lot of retail perspective and just business in general, there's about 50% of the people that would like to pass their business on to the next generation, but only about 30% of them actually transfer. So 30% of all family-owned businesses survive into the second generation. Guess how many survive into the third?
Well, probably less than 5, right?
12.
Yeah. Okay.
12. Yeah. But
I'm a little more pessimistic, I guess.
Yeah. But 12% is not a very high number when you think of it, considering a generation is only 20 or so years. So, when you see these businesses out there celebrating their 75th anniversary and these different things, it's like, wow, that really has stood the test of time. Yeah. So it's really quite an interesting thing when we look at that. And then you had mentioned liquidation, which is my least favorite option, but one that a lot of retailers pick because they don't know that either one, they haven't got their business set up so that it would actually sell properly because they haven't spent the time that on the things we've talked about today in this episode. And or maybe they just need a quick out and they want to be done. And the lease is coming due and they don't know where to renew for another 5 years.
I've seen this story dozens of times. The lease is up. They're going to raise the lease. They don't want to move. They got too much.
But you know what?
Yeah.
This is poor planning.
Yeah.
Because they knew the lease was coming up 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So if they would have started planning 3 years ago and started setting all this stuff up, number one, their business probably would have been running a whole lot better. And number two, they may have been confident enough to sign the lease if they've already removed themselves from the business and let their team run it. And number three, if they really didn't want it, it would have been actually valuable to sell.
So it is. Yeah. I think liquidation is like the option of last resort for a lot of people, sadly.
Yeah.
Like,
but it's the way that a lot of them happen, and I find it sad.
Yeah, because there's a lot of lost value there, right?
Oh my gosh, endless.
Yeah.
When you think of the customer, that customer list we talked about, when you think about all that stuff, all the process management where somebody could come in, take your process and sort of build upon that. That's how I opened another store. It's like, hey, once I built the process, now I have the process and I can implant it on the next store. Like those kind of things. People will pay for that kind of stuff if it's done properly, and they'll give you the multiples that we're talking about, but they won't if it's all in your head.
Mm-hmm.
If all of the process is in your head, and I'm talking to you, the owner, not Gary, but if all the process is in your head, how can anybody extract that after you're gone?
Right.
They can't.
Right.
So you have to start extracting process. And with all of the great tools we've had, even since our last episode, Gary, ChatGPT and all these different AIs and Otter and Loom Video, all the different things that you can set up the process that go, all of the processes that go on in your business, so easy. Keep them in a secure environment. We use Google Drive, but it doesn't matter. Dropbox, wherever the case, so that they're searchable, understandable, repeatable, and executable. Then you've got all this process, not only for the team that's using it right now, but for any team that comes down the road. And people will pay for that on an exit.
So you mentioned the phrase multiple a couple of times. What do you mean by that, in case someone doesn't know? Because I've heard it applied different ways. What do you mean by that? And what would be considered a average multiple, let's say, for a retail business, Yeah.
Well, as everybody knows, numbers are weird. And, when we look at from an evaluation standpoint, or if we were going to set a business up for sale, we would start looking through your income statement and your balance sheet. And what we're looking for.
How many years do you go back?
Five.
Okay.
Typically. Yeah. Heavily weighted on the last past year, right? And then it kind of goes down in weighting years 2 to 5. But from that perspective, we want to go into the income statement and we want to what we call recast earnings, because your goal with your accountant has been to lower your earnings for however many years so that you don't pay as much tax.
Right.
And that's a very common thing for most business owners. But if you have basically no income in your business and people are looking at your business and saying, this business doesn't make any money, then how valuable is that?
Right.
So what we want to do is we want to start recasting your business earnings. And I'll use one example. When we recast one person's business earnings, they had a motorhome that was worth about $200,000 on the books of their landscaping business. And it's like, hey, the new owner probably doesn't need your motorhome to run the landscaping business. And they're like, I go to a trade show once a year and I write it off. And that's kind of how I do it so that I can have my motorhome. It's like, but we need to recast all of that back into the books to show the true value of your business, right?
And you can do that? I mean, that's a thing you can do?
You have to.
Okay. Well, I'm just curious because it's almost like, going back in time and, cooking your books a little. That's what it sounds a little bit like, but it's not.
Well, people travel. They like go to Italy for a trade show and they're at the trade show for one day, but they write off a 2-week vacation.
Oh, I see how you're saying. So you're saying there's certain expenses you can take out that are.
Yeah. It's like, does the person need to go to the Italy shoe show? No, I just wanted to go to Italy and we went there so I could, write off the travel and some of this stuff. And it's like, okay, well, that was $14,000. So that $14,000 trip goes back in to the recasted earnings, because if that person doesn't need to do it, they actually have a $14,000 benefit for next year when they don't go to Italy on their books.
Right.
So a lot of this kind of stuff between the balance sheet and the income statement have to be recast. If you have family in the business and your family, potentially you're paying, I don't know, your son $50,000 when you're paying everybody else who's doing the same job $40,000.
Right.
So you're giving your son a premium of $10,000 for the same job as everybody else. Well, that has to be recast because chances are the new owner isn't going to hire your son for $10,000 more than he's hiring everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
that all sounds
these
reasonable
things,
now. Right.
yeah, all of these things happen every day in business.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to spend some time, go back through all of those things, recast the earnings, recast the balance sheet to get a more clear picture.
Right.
And once we have a clear picture of the true, let's call it a balance sheet for the new owner and the true income and expense report for the new owner, then we look at the multiples of that, and we recast that income, and we start looking at those 4 C's that we talked about, right? And we want to see how strong those are. How strong is your customer list? Because if this new person takes over, let's just say you had 5 major accounts, and all of those 5 major accounts are actually fishing buddies of the existing owners. Right. And your other 20 accounts are, just everybody else. But the 5 ones, or even 4 of the 5 that are personal friends with the owner. Well, when the owner leaves, is there still that connection to do the business with you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All of these things, that's where you start talking about multiples. Is that going to take it from a 1 times to a 2 times, or is it going to take it from a 1 times to a half? Because it's not as strong as some of the other ones. So if we have really strong customer capital and not very strong process capital, it'll take down that multiple.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not just going to be, hey, you earned $100,000, then I'll pay you $100,000 plus your inventory next year. There's going to be some multiple either down or up, depending on how strong those 4 C's are.
Yeah. Yeah, I can certainly see that, where you'd have maybe someone, like you said, in a community, and maybe they're serving on some boards, and they're in the Chamber of Commerce, and they're doing all these things, and they've got that personal capital built in that they're getting business from. That's why they're doing it. And a new person comes in, they don't have that.
Especially if we're talking about professional, like lawyers and accountants and realtors and all that sort of stuff, right? Because a lot of times it's their name above the door. Like at Shootopia, it's not Mohr's Shoes, it's Shootopia. Right. So if somebody else came in, although they see me on video and I've been around for a while and all that stuff, but ultimately it's not my name up there, and it's not, my whole business isn't revolving around me.
Right. Yeah. But why not? You're a nice looking guy.
Well, I still do all the video because I'm the one that talks a lot.
So again, I'm not sure we really got to the thing. Like, what is a multiple? Like when you say
it's a times. So when you look at the valuation,
times the net earnings, or okay,
once you recast your earnings, like we just talked about, you're going to take it's basically an EBITDA, right? Earnings before incomes, taxes, depreciation, all of that, and then you're going to recast that. And once you've recast that, then you're going to look at these other factors that we had talked about, the 4 C's, and you're going to multiply that by either, if you're rating really high on all those, you're going to get a higher multiple. Right. So of your earnings, right? As far as what the business would projected sell, the projected selling number for that, or most probable selling price, as some people like to use.
So when you're working with a broker, let's say, for example, I'm running Gary's camera store here, and I've been doing all the right things, and I'm getting ready to get out, and I'm going to have a 3-year exit plan. But I go to a broker and say, I'm listening to sell. Does he find like multiple people, or how does that even work? I guess I'm trying to curious how that process works from their side of it, right? I mean, they're looking at, hey, I'm going to actually like start a competition between 2 or 3 people who might be interested in this, because they want to get the price as high as possible, right? Because they're working for the seller.
I'm a little bit biased on this one, Gary, because I used to be a business broker. I was a licensed realtor, right? Yeah. So as here in Canada, part of being a business broker, a licensed business broker, is that you were also a licensed realtor. So I could actually sell houses and stuff. I didn't choose to do that, but I went through all the training for all of that before I took my business brokerage license. And then from that perspective, when I look at, if you're a little pizza place, you'll see little pizza places selling for $20,000 that your local realtor will put up there. But when you start looking at real businesses, and I'm not saying that isn't a real business, but when you look at businesses that have higher volume and are worth more, I think that's when the use of a business broker is useful, because The business broker has been trained in actually, just like we just talked about, going through all of these different issues, setting everything up. They're trained in negotiation. They're trained through all of the financial details that back this to come up with a proper valuation of your business so that you can maximize your exit. And when you do that, most business brokers aren't selling houses. Their connections and all of their knowledge base is within the business community. Sure. Well, most likely it's going to be another business person that buys your business. So from that perspective, do you want your business on MLS, or do you want your business to go up into the right network of business brokers? Because within that network of business brokers, those guys that's what they do. They sell businesses. So they're always talking to different people, looking for different businesses. As a realtor would be saying, hey, listen, I'm looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home backing on the water. Well, a business owner may say, I'm looking for a business that's in retail, that generates at least $1 million, that's within 50 miles or kilometers of my house. And, they have parameters around that. Well, now we can go into the database of all the businesses and really fire that down and dig into, and we can look at, through the Business Brokers Association, comparables, which is really hard to do for businesses. It's not as easy as just saying, hey, the house 3 doors down the road, that's exactly the same model as mine, went for $1 million last day. Or last week, right? And there's not the comparables are harder on the business side. So by using a business broker to help you with that facility, they can really start to nail that stuff down as good as it's going to be.
Well, that's interesting, because like I said, I'm that area of kind of business is kind of a mystery. I was wondering how that worked, but it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
That, their job is to, find the people who are, hey, they may not have a love of shoes or a love of photography, but they're looking for a business. And if you've got the process and the people and the customers and the social capital lined up, shazam, you've got a sellable product.
I wasn't specifically looking for, my previous businesses before this were a bathroom renovation company. I owned a cleaning franchise that we built from 30 customers to 300. So we 10 times a cleaning franchise. And I started the other business in 1994. It's still going today, almost 30 years later. And I sold it back in 2009. And the guy who took it over is doing really well. So I came from a service business, and I went into a retail business. And the reason I felt comfortable in doing that is because it aligned with all of that stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And so from your perspective, you can sell to a competitor, and that's fine and dandy. But the reality of it is if you could sell to someone outside of competition, you will probably end up getting more for your business.
Yeah, that happens very typically in the photographic industry, is competitors tend to buy each other. It's kind of a, and it happens.
But you've got to set your business up through the right process, have the right people, have the right accountability, all this sort of stuff, so that somebody from outside the industry is going to feel comfortable in coming in and buying you out.
Right. Well, that is a big challenge. Well, listen, Pete, where can people go to get more information about simplifying entrepreneurship and your coaching? Because this has been a great conversation. I think you might have got a couple people interested wanting to follow up with you.
Well, awesome. Best way is really just go to my website. Like you said it already, Simplifying Entrepreneurship is, I know it's a long one, but simplifyingentreprenurship.com.
You need to simplify that.
Yeah, exactly. And then, .com. And if you want, I've got a download, which is going from operator to owner. And it's just really a small ebook, kind of going through some of the stuff we've talked a little bit about today, and this getting your mindset around, not making every decision in your business. And that's at simplifyingentreprenurship.com/laws. So it's the 10 laws of moving from operator to owner. So just LAWS. And, I hang out most of the time on LinkedIn. So Pete Mohr, MOHR.
Awesome. Well, great to see you again, Pete. And who knows, maybe in 18 months, we'll connect on another topic.
I'd love to, Gary. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. Read more great stories and sign up for the newsletter at www.thedeadpixelssociety.com.